Welcome, Liz, to your exhibition here with Anne Leon, Finds. Thank you very much for exhibiting at Timeless Textiles.
Thank you very much for having us.
Extraordinary exhibition that we're surrounded with. Liz, can you tell me a bit about what inspired you both around this exhibition? Because clearly you've been working collaboratively for a while.
Anne and I are both people who walk around with our eyes on the ground, and we pick things up as we find them, and of course that's the big word, find. So we were looking for something to do together that would encompass the fact that we never throw anything away that we do find. Anne tends to walk on our local beach, the seashore, and as it happened I had been walking on the floor of the ancient inland sea in the Northern Territory, so we thought that was an interesting crossover and we'd work from there.
As you do, you walk on the inland of the sea in the middle of Australia. Can you just expand on that walk?
It's quite an extraordinary place. I was lucky enough to be at Curtin Springs for nearly a month over a 12-month period, which the large part of Curtin Springs Station, 1 million hectares, is the old seafloor of the ancient inland sea, which evaporated away. So there's fossils there, there's ochres, there's bones, there's the same sort of things you find on the strand at the sea, just a bit older.
How much older?
Well, they think these things change, and I am very interested in how historians work these things out, and archaeologists. But they're looking at about at least 10 million years ago. And then it probably evaporated. It was there for quite some time, short period of time geologically, but quite some time for us. Evaporated probably about 2 million years ago. But early settlers couldn't believe that there was not an inland sea. So they kept sending people out to find it. And all they found was dry lake beds, places like Lake Eyre, which does come to life occasionally. But then of course it's salt. So the landscape of Australia is littered with names like Lake Disappointment, Lake Amadeus, Lake Weary. So I use those as well in stitching for my works. But Anne has also come back into more plant-based evidences. On the beaches near where we both live, you find a lot of plant debris washed up, as well as the remains of animals, and so you find seed pods and dead flowers and so forth. So yes, we have this interesting crossover, and we both also work from plant-dyed fabric as well as plant-made paper, as well as, so it's based in a very similar source.
So what does a working day look like when you tour together?
Chaotic. When we take it in turns to go to each other's studios, we only live about 500 metres apart. So if I'm coming down to do a silk screening day at Anne's, because we did a couple of, several collaborative lengths of fabric based on photographs from Curtin Springs, we try and get started before it gets too hot so the inks don't dry out. Anne's studio is very much it's a huge space, but there's a lot of people going through it. So we're climbing all over a table that's about 20 feet wide and trying to get the screen across the centre of a piece of fabric, and then discussing the colour, and then going, oh, aren't we clever? And then if Anne is coming up to my studio is very different. It's very quiet and it's down the back of a jungle, and she does etching up in my studio. So Anne's, we're climbing up ladders and sticking our heads in pots. At mine, we're sitting down and scratching quietly away with acid. And just generally talking. We just chat a lot. And then we give ourselves a reward around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 1:30 I think.
And what are the advantages of working collaboratively?
You have someone who is very close to the idea, coming at it from a different and personal angle. So when you're bouncing off that person, you're not getting something straight back, you're getting it through on a sort of a refracted angle, which is really interesting. It opens up other things. And then we also have those moments where one of us will say, oh, I thought we could print that in green, and then the other one goes, oh, I thought that too. And someone in the background, some family member is going, oh, you're just saying that. But no, we found ourselves very much on track with deciding what we would print, how we would do individual works, as well as how we would collaborate. So, yeah, it's funny that Anne is a photo silkscreen printer and plant dyer. I'm a metal plate etcher, relief printer and paper maker, but I'll boil anything. So yeah, we've had this really good overlap in that way. Yeah.
This exhibition sits really well, and there's very little distinction between both of you artists, so it's clear that your collaboration works well together.
I think the commonality of the materials too, coming back to the plant dyeing and the paper making, and then what we do on top of that. Really helps to unify it, both with the colour and the idea. The idea is incredibly important. I think that we're really lucky that we found each other as friends, and that we can do that divergent thing, and then we cross over really well. So it won't be our last collaborative, I feel.
Is this your first?
Yes, it's the first time Anne and I have worked together in this way. We've worked together at the same venue as tutors, and we've helped each other out with various other things. I might ring Anne up and say, I'm having trouble getting this colour to take. She might ring me up and say, have you got any indigo to spare? So it's a very much a give and take that way. But this is the first time we've put work together in this way.
I'd be very interested for you to talk a bit about the technique of the pieces behind you.
The colograph plate is a relief print technique, but it can be printed in taglio as well. So what that means is that these have been built up using fabrics, laces, and impasto medium, and gesso and string. It just depends on how fine a detail I wanted a line to be, or what kind. Oh, and there's also sequence, what kind of texture I wanted them to have. So the first way to print off them is just to roll ink over them with a firm sponge roller and run them through a press. So that's your relief technique, and you'll also get a slight embossing if you do it on paper. With one of the pieces here, I've printed them on organza, again through a press. With a sheet of paper over the top of the organza, you get two for the price of one, because the ink will travel straight through that. The other way you can print with them is that, like an etching, you work ink into all the surfaces, all the spaces below the surface, and then you wipe the surface off and you get a different kind of image. That's an intaglio print behind you, not necessarily of these plates, but yes, that's an intaglio technique. They're etching techniques. So I enjoyed doing those. They were a lot of fun. You never know really with a colograph plate what you are going to get until you do that proof print. They have to be sealed before you print with them at all as well. So they need several coats of shellac done over a week, front and back, so that they're rock solid. But they have been printed many times, and I like the way the plates age as you print. And they have a life. They flatten out through the press, so you're not going to get great prints off them for 100 pressings. So it's worthwhile now for the plates to move on as fish fossils for someone else.
They're very beautiful. And another technique that you've used in this exhibition is these beautiful inland sea pieces. Could you speak a bit about those?
There's 3 in this series, and they have, in common, they have a stitched silk. It's actually a silk quilt background. There are 3 layers there, but they're very fine layers, stitched with the names of all the dry lakes, which people insisted on naming because, they'd made it that far. This is the first of the Search for the Inland Sea series that I did. And I had a very strong idea about what I wanted the camel bone to look like. I'd found the camel bone on one of the walks around the back of the station. And I also started to work with ochres that I had found, grinding them and turning them into paint. So I did that on the spot. Every day I would work for a little while in the paper mill that Curtin Springs has. It's a very small cottage industry mill, and in the afternoon I grind ochres and do drawings. take lots of photographs. I couldn't actually fit the camel bone in the suitcase, so I was reliant on a lot of photographs for reference, as well as some of the sketches I did on the site. So all the colours in that on the drawing part are ochres, and it's plant dyed silk in the backgrounds, and I've fitted the background around the drawing. I've done that on the 3 in this set because I rather like the combination. I like the way the bone comes to the front. Because basically that's, you know, the signs of explorers are what they've left behind in the names on the map and the bits and pieces that have dropped off, the animals and their campsites as they've gone. So yes, it's really the story of the camel bone. There's also some of the tracks in the background. You know, when you look at maps of the explorers in the old social studies books, everybody has a different dot and dash for their various little wanderings across the immense landscape.
You're a very fine, neat stitcher.
That comes from years and years. I love running stitch. I really do love running stitch. I do have to be very firm with myself these days, because if I sit and get too obsessive about it, I can't do anything then for the next 3 days. But if I take it in just little amounts, I can still keep doing a lot of running stitch. I love the way it gives the silk a texture, and it gives it contour, which in this instance is really what you want. A lot of when you're flying over Central Australia, a lot of that landscape looks like the ripples in the sand of a low tide on a beach. So again, we come back to the sea, and it's very strange when you think you're flying over this landscape, but it was a sea, and the marks of it are still there in the landscape. The piece behind me is also reflective of the underlying interest in science. It's the basis of a lot of my work. So it's called the scientific table. It was also looking at the idea of classification, how we have binomial nomenclature. 2 words. Everything that's alive is classified in science with 2 words. It's etching on silk, which is actually a really lovely technique. Habitised silk takes intaglio technique beautifully, and you can do lots and lots with it once it's been through the press. And then of course it's canvas stitched on, so technically it's a quilt again. It's got 3 layers. The stitching helps bring forward some of the finer etched bones, but this is an example of a pufferfish that I found on my beach. I have a great pufferfish collection of dead things. Some of the dead things are in the process table in the gallery as well. Anne's also put her dead things in the process table as well. But the pufferfish at the top has got those lovely elements of decay, yet he still has his teeth. And it's the ability to take that fine detail that etching on silk really satisfies. And that's one of the things I love about drawing, and for me etching's an extension of drawing, except that you can print it on plant or on fabric or do whatever you like with it as well. Of course, with drawing I've now discovered I can cut holes in silk work and make it work that way too. So,
where to from here for you?
I think I have another series of drawings about the rim of the inland sea. It's called the Rim Rock. You can drive along it. I was let loose in an old ute for the day after I had been shown how to use the 2-way radio and swore to call in every hour. And they reckoned I couldn't get lost. Well, I actually did manage to just a bit, but I didn't tell anyone because I found myself again. You can drive along the rim wall, which is it's not that high, but in a flat country it's megalithic, and it goes for some 30 kilometres before it disappears back into the desert floor. And it's incredibly red, and it's the shore of the inland sea. And I photographed that entire wall basically over a day. It was great not having anyone else in the car. I got to the point where I didn't stop the car. It was an old diesel. I just had it first, and I'd jump out and it'd keep going, and I'd take photos and then I'd jump back in. So I think there's going to be something from the rim wall, again working with ochres and combinations of fabrics.
Mighty size, isn't it, what you were looking at?
Yes. The age soaks up 3 feet. So yeah, there is still some mining to do there.
I imagine it made you feel very introspective about our significance on this planet when you're walking
It
around.
sort of does, but it also makes you think when you're in that landscape by yourself, you also feel your brain expand. It's a huge sky. It's an amazing colour. And there's not a lot of thought processes going on, I found. It was sensory overload. So apart from the fact that the flies would wake you up every now and again, there was this tendency to just stand and stare. But I managed to bring back probably about 3 house bricks worth of opals this time. So I've got a bit to keep me going, and lots of photographs of the rim wall, and I will be doing some photo silkscreen work with Annie on the rim wall, and because we've discussed that, and also I'll be doing some more drawing, and I think I would be, I'm definitely going to be etching onto the drawings as well. Yeah.
It'd be wonderful to look forward to seeing that. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, it's going to be my holiday activity.
As you do.
As you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne.
What a pleasure.